What happens when a casual morning show conversation turns into a heated confrontation that leaves everyone speechless? Today, we're diving into the explosive moment that had Kylie Kelce walking off the Today with Jenna and Friends show after what started as light banter quickly escalated into something much more serious. Before we get into this wild story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts, because this one is going to have you picking sides. The Today with Jenna and Friends show was supposed to be Kylie Kelce's opportunity to discuss her upcoming charity initiative and share some light-hearted stories about life in the NFL spotlight. The segment was scheduled for 20 minutes, a perfect slot for what producers expected would be an easy, feel-good interview. Jenna Bush Hager had done her homework, preparing questions about Kylie's recent projects and her experience navigating the public eye as the wife of Philadelphia Eagles center Jason Kelce. As the cameras rolled, Jenna welcomed Kylie with her trademark warm smile. "We are so excited to have Kylie Kelce with us this morning. Kylie, thank you for joining us. And I have to say, you look absolutely radiant today." Kylie settled into her chair, appearing relaxed and ready for what she assumed would be a straightforward interview. "Thank you so much for having me. Jenna, I'm really excited to talk about the work we're doing with the foundation and some of the amazing people we've been able to help." The conversation began smoothly enough, with Jenna asking about Kylie's charitable work and her family life. Kylie spoke passionately about their foundation's focus on supporting youth sports programs in underserved communities, sharing heartwarming stories about kids who had benefited from their initiatives. The energy in the studio was positive, with both women seeming to enjoy the discussion. "It's incredible what you're doing," Jenna said, nodding appreciatively. "And I imagine having Jason's platform really helps amplify your message." Speaking of Jason, I have to ask about something that's been making headlines recently. There's been quite a bit of discussion about NFL wives and their level of involvement in their husbands' careers. Some people feel that certain wives, particularly those who are very vocal about their support, might be crossing some boundaries. Kylie's expression shifted slightly, though she maintained her composure. "I'm not sure what you're referring to specifically, but I think supporting your spouse in their career is pretty normal, don't you?" Jenna leaned forward, her tone still conversational, but with a hint of something more probing. "Of course, support is wonderful, but there seems to be this new phenomenon where some NFL wives are becoming almost as famous as their husbands, sometimes overshadowing the actual players and their achievements. I'm curious about your thoughts on that balance." The question hung in the air for a moment, and viewers could sense a subtle tension beginning to build. Kylie's smile became more measured as she processed what was being asked. "I think every family handles their public presence differently. Some people are naturally more private, others are more open. I don't think there's necessarily a right or a wrong way to navigate it." But Jenna wasn't quite ready to move on. "That's a very diplomatic answer, but I think a lot of people are wondering about the impact this has on the game itself. When the focus shifts from the athletes to their personal lives and relationships, does that diminish what these incredible players have worked so hard to achieve?" Kylie's posture straightened, and there was now an unmistakable edge to her voice. "Are you suggesting that wives supporting their husbands somehow takes away from their accomplishments? Because that seems like a pretty outdated way of thinking." The studio audience, which had been quietly enjoying the conversation, began to shift in their seats. Even the camera operators seemed to sense that something was changing in the dynamic between the two women. Jenna, perhaps realizing she had touched a nerve, attempted to soften her approach. "Oh no, that's not what I'm saying at all. I just think there's an interesting conversation to be had about visibility and attention in professional sports. Some people feel that when family members become too prominent in the media, it can create distractions." Kylie's eyes flashed, and her voice took on a sharper tone. "Distractions? So, women supporting their husbands is now considered a distraction. That's really what we're going with here?" The tension in the studio was now palpable. Jenna's co-hosts, who had been largely silent during this exchange, exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. The producers behind the cameras were frantically trying to decide whether to intervene or let the moment play out. "I think you're misunderstanding what I'm trying to say," Jenna said, her voice becoming more defensive. "I'm simply asking about the balance between personal and professional life in the public eye. It's a legitimate question that a lot of people are curious about." Kylie leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. "Let me be very clear about something," she said, her voice cutting through the awkward silence like a knife. "I came here to talk about charity work, about helping kids who don't have access to sports programs. Instead, you want to have some kind of debate about whether I'm too visible as a supportive wife. Is that really what morning television has come to?" Jenna shifted uncomfortably in her chair, clearly realizing that her line of questioning had backfired spectacularly. "Kylie, I think we're getting off track here. I was simply trying to explore a topic that's been in the news lately. It wasn't meant to be personal." "But it is personal," Kylie shot back, her composure beginning to crack. "When you sit there and suggest that wives being supportive is somehow a distraction or a problem, you're making it personal. You're basically telling me that I should sit in the background and keep quiet so I don't interfere with my husband's career." The co-hosts exchanged increasingly worried glances. One of them, clearly trying to defuse the situation, attempted to jump in. "Maybe we should take a step back and talk about the foundation work that Kylie mentioned earlier. That sounds like such an important initiative." But Kylie wasn't interested in being redirected. Her focus remained laser-sharp on Jenna. "No, I think we should finish this conversation because apparently there's some kind of standard that NFL wives are supposed to meet, and I'd love to know exactly what that is. Should we not attend games? Should we not celebrate our husband's successes? Should we pretend we don't exist?" Jenna's face was flushed, and her trademark confidence seemed to be evaporating by the minute. "That's not what I was suggesting at all. And I think you know that I was asking a broader question about the role of family members in professional sports." "A broader question," Kylie repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Right. When you talk about certain wives becoming too famous and overshadowing their husbands, that's just a general observation. You're not talking about anyone specific." The studio had gone completely silent except for the conversation between the two women. Even the audience seemed to be holding their breath, sensing that they were witnessing something that would be talked about long after the cameras stopped rolling. Jenna took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "Look, I think we've gotten into some miscommunication here. My intention was never to criticize you or anyone else personally. I was trying to have a thoughtful discussion about a topic that's been in the media." "Miscommunication," Kylie said, with a bitter laugh. "That's one way to put it. Another way would be to say that you invited me on your show under false pretenses, so you could ambush me with questions about whether I'm an appropriate NFL wife. That's not fair, Kylie." "And you know it," Jenna replied, her own temper starting to flare. "I've been doing this job for years, and I pride myself on asking thoughtful questions. If you can't handle a discussion about your public profile, maybe you shouldn't have agreed to come on television." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone in the studio could sense that a line had been crossed. Kylie's eyes widened, and for a moment she seemed genuinely speechless. When she finally spoke, her voice was dangerously quiet. "Excuse me, did you just tell me that I can't handle being on television because I objected to your inappropriate questions?" Jenna immediately realized her mistake. "That's not what I meant. I was just saying that public figures have to expect difficult questions. Difficult questions about my charity work. Difficult questions about helping disadvantaged kids. Because those are the questions I prepared for. I didn't prepare to be lectured about how to be a proper NFL wife by someone who's never been married to a professional athlete." The personal nature of the attack seemed to sting Jenna, and her professional demeanor began to slip entirely. "I don't need to be married to an athlete to observe what's happening in the sports world. And frankly, Some of the behavior we've seen from certain NFL families has been over the top and attention-seeking. There it is, Kylie said, sitting up straighter in her chair. Now we're getting to the real issue. You think I'm attention-seeking? You think my support for my husband is over the top? You think I need to learn my place and step back so I don't embarrass myself or the NFL? The co-hosts were now openly panicking, looking desperately at the producers for guidance. One of them made another attempt to intervene. Ladies, I think we should take a commercial break and regroup. This has gotten a little heated. But both women ignored the suggestion completely. They were locked in a battle of wills, and neither seemed willing to back down. Jenna, perhaps sensing that she was losing the argument, decided to double down on her position. I never said you needed to learn your place. But I do think there's value in maintaining some boundaries between personal and professional life. When family members become bigger stories than the actual games, it changes the focus of the sport. Kylie stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. So, my husband works his entire life to become one of the best centers in the NFL, and this is what you reduce our family's support to? The studio atmosphere had become electric with tension as Kylie remained standing, her hands planted firmly on her hips as she stared down at Jenna. You know what the real problem is here? You invited me on this show because you thought I'd be an easy target. You thought you could ask me leading questions and I'd just smile and nod and give you some sound bites about knowing my role? Jenna's face was now bright red, and her voice rose defensively. That is absolutely not true. I invited you here because I thought our viewers would be interested in hearing about your foundation work and your perspective on life in the NFL. My perspective on life in the NFL, Kylie repeated mockingly. Right. And apparently my perspective is wrong, because I actually show up and support my husband instead of sitting quietly in the background like some kind of decorative accessory. The producers were now frantically signaling from behind the cameras, clearly desperate to find a way to salvage what had become a complete disaster. But both women were too focused on their confrontation to pay attention to anyone else in the studio. I never called you a decorative accessory, Jenna said, her voice becoming shrill. You're putting words in my mouth and twisting everything I've said. I was trying to have a nuanced conversation about the intersection of personal and professional life in sports. Kylie let out a harsh laugh. Nuanced? There was nothing nuanced about suggesting that supportive wives are distractions and attention seekers. There was nothing nuanced about implying that we should stay in our lane and let the men handle the important stuff. I did not say that, Jenna insisted, but her protests were falling on deaf ears. You absolutely did say that. And now you're trying to backtrack because you realize how it sounds, Kylie shot back. But here's the thing, Jenna. I don't need your approval or anyone else's approval to support my husband. I don't need permission to be excited about his success or to celebrate his achievements. One of the co-hosts made a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. Kylie, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. Maybe we can find some common ground and have a more productive conversation. Kylie turned her attention to the co-host, her expression softening slightly, but her voice still firm. The only misunderstanding here is that I came on this show expecting to be treated with basic respect. Instead, I've been subjected to questions that seem designed to make me defend my right to exist as a supportive spouse. Jenna, perhaps sensing that she was losing any remaining credibility, decided to make one final attempt to justify her position. Look, I think you're being overly sensitive about this. These are legitimate questions that people in the media and fans have been discussing. I'm not the first person to notice that some NFL wives have become very high profile. The word sensitive seemed to be the final straw for Kylie. Her eyes flashed with anger, and she took a step closer to Jenna's chair. Overly sensitive. So now I'm overly sensitive because I don't appreciate being ambushed with sexist talking points disguised as journalism? They're not sexist talking points, Jenna protested weakly. Oh, they're not? Kylie's voice was now dripping with sarcasm. So if this was about male family members of athletes, you'd be asking the same questions? If Tom Brady's father was very vocal about supporting his son, would you be questioning whether he was too attention-seeking? Would you suggest that he was overshadowing Tom's achievements? The question hung in the air, and Jenna's silence spoke volumes. The entire studio seemed to be waiting for her response, but she appeared to have no good answer to give. "That's what I thought," Kylie said quietly. "This whole conversation has been about putting women in their place, about suggesting that we should be seen and not heard. Well, I have news for you, Jenna. I'm not going to sit here and let you lecture me about how to be a proper NFL wife." Jenna made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Kylie, I think you're really mischaracterizing what I was trying to do here. I have enormous respect for you and all NFL families. I was genuinely trying to explore an interesting topic that's been in the news." "An interesting topic?" Kylie repeated, her voice filled with disgust. "That's what you call questioning whether supportive wives are appropriate? That's what you call suggesting that we're distractions and attention seekers? An interesting topic?" The co-hosts were now looking openly panicked, clearly realizing that there was no way to recover from this disaster. The audience sat in stunned silence, many of them shifting uncomfortably in their seats as they witnessed what had become a complete implosion on live television. The full-blown confrontation had reached its peak. "I think we should definitely take that commercial break now," one of the co-hosts said desperately. But both women ignored the suggestion completely. Kylie began gathering her purse and jacket, her movements sharp and deliberate. "You know what, Jenna? I came here in good faith to talk about helping kids and supporting community programs. Instead, I've been subjected to a thinly veiled attack on my character and my marriage." "It wasn't an attack," Jenna protested, but her voice lacked any conviction. "It absolutely was an attack," Kylie replied, slinging her purse over her shoulder. "And the fact that you can't even acknowledge that makes it even worse. You've wasted my time. You've wasted your viewers' time. And you've shown exactly what kind of journalist you really are." The words stung, and Jenna's professional facade finally cracked. "I don't think that's fair. Kylie, I've been doing this job for years, and I've always conducted myself professionally." Kylie paused in her preparations to leave and turned back to face her one final time. "Professionally? Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like amateur hour masquerading as serious journalism." The final exchange seemed to drain all the energy from the studio, leaving everyone in a state of shocked silence. Kylie adjusted her jacket with deliberate precision, her movements conveying a dignity that stood in stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, but filled with unmistakable finality. "Here's what I want your viewers to understand," Kylie said, addressing the cameras directly rather than looking at Jenna. "I am proud of my husband. I am proud of his achievements. I am proud to support him, and I will continue to do so regardless of what anyone thinks about it. If that makes me too visible or too vocal for some people's tastes, then that's their problem, not mine." Jenna made one last desperate attempt to maintain control over the interview. "Kylie, please. I think we can work through this misunderstanding. Why don't you sit back down and we can have a more constructive conversation?" Kylie turned to face Jenna directly, her expression a mixture of disappointment and resolve. "There's no misunderstanding here. You know exactly what you were trying to do, and so does everyone else in this studio. You thought you could use me to make some kind of point about NFL wives, and when I pushed back, you doubled down instead of acknowledging that your approach was wrong." The co-hosts sat frozen in their chairs, unsure whether to attempt another intervention or simply let the situation play out to its inevitable conclusion. The audience remained eerily quiet, many leaning forward in their seats, not wanting to miss a single word of what had become television history in the making. "I want to be very clear about something," Kylie continued, her voice carrying across the silent studio. "I don't owe anyone an explanation for how I choose to support my family. I don't owe anyone an apology for being visible or vocal or enthusiastic about my husband's career, and I certainly don't owe anyone the courtesy of sitting quietly while they question my motivations and my character." Jenna's face had gone pale, and she appeared to be struggling to find words. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I never questioned your character, Kylie." "You absolutely did," Kylie replied without hesitation. "When you suggested that I was attention-seeking, you questioned my character. When you implied that my support was somehow inappropriate or over the top, you questioned my character. When you told me that I couldn't handle difficult questions, you questioned my character." The brutal honesty of Kylie's words seemed to land like physical blows, and Jenna visibly winced with each accusation. The producers behind the cameras were frantically signaling for a commercial break, but it was clear that nothing was going to stop this moment from playing out completely. "I think what's most disappointing about this whole experience," Kylie said, taking a step toward the edge of the stage, "is that you had an opportunity to have a meaningful conversation about the work we're doing to help kids and underserved communities. You could have used this platform to highlight important issues and maybe even inspired some of your viewers to get involved in charitable work." She paused, letting the weight of those words sink in before continuing. "Instead, you chose to waste everyone's time with questions designed to make me look bad and to reinforce outdated stereotypes about how women should behave. That's not journalism, Jenna. That's just mean-spirited gossip, disguised as serious television." One of the co-hosts made a final desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. "Kylie, before you go, is there anything you'd like to say about the foundation work you mentioned earlier?" For a moment, Kylie's expression softened, and viewers could see a glimpse of the warm, passionate woman who had started the interview. "Talking about helping children, the foundation is doing incredible work, and we're always looking for more people to get involved. Kids deserve access to sports and activities regardless of their economic circumstances, and we're trying to make that happen in as many communities as possible." She looked directly into the camera, speaking with genuine emotion. "If any of your viewers want to learn more about what we're doing or how they can help, they can visit our website. Because at the end of the day, that's what actually matters. Not whether I'm too vocal or too visible, but whether we're making a difference in kids' lives." The sincerity of her words created a powerful contrast to the conflict that had dominated the interview, highlighting just how far off track the conversation had gone. Jenna sat in stunned silence, clearly realizing that she had squandered an opportunity to do something meaningful with her platform. Kylie began walking toward the edge of the stage, her departure now inevitable. As she reached the steps, she turned back one final time, her voice carrying a note of sadness rather than anger. "You know what, Jenna? I actually feel sorry for you. You had a chance to do real journalism today, to highlight important work and maybe make a positive impact. Instead, you chose to attack a woman for supporting her husband. I hope it was worth it." With those final words, Kylie Kelce walked down the steps and off the stage, leaving behind a studio full of stunned silence and a host who seemed to realize too late just how badly she had miscalculated. The cameras continued to roll as Jenna sat frozen in her chair, clearly struggling to process what had just happened and how to proceed. The co-hosts exchanged helpless glances, and one of them finally managed to stammer out something about taking a commercial break. But the damage was already done, and everyone in the studio knew they had just witnessed a moment that would be talked about and analyzed for years to come.